The global financial system is on the brink of a seismic shift, with BRICS nations challenging the US dollar's dominance, setting the stage for a high-stakes battle for economic supremacy. The rise of BRICS and its challenge to the dollar represents a potential turning point in history, questioning the sustainability of the US-centric system and pushing for a more equitable global order. The 2008 financial crisis and the US's weaponization of the dollar have fueled efforts by BRICS to circumvent the dollar-based system, representing a growing threat to its dominance. The challenge to the dollar's supremacy is part of a broader trend of emerging markets gaining economic clout and demanding a greater say in the global economic order. In 2018, Trump warned against undermining the US dollar's dominance, but BRICS nations responded with determination to forge their own path, setting the stage for a global showdown. Brazil emerges as a leader in challenging the dollar's supremacy, promoting local currencies in trade, and launching the PIX payment system to reduce dependence on the US currency. Brazil's efforts to promote the real and reduce reliance on the US dollar are part of a broader trend of de-dollarization, but significant challenges remain. Brazil's bold moves prompt other countries to reassess their reliance on the US dollar, potentially reshaping the global balance of power and financial order. The idea of a shared BRICS currency challenges long-held assumptions about global finance, with proponents arguing it could provide a stable alternative to the US dollar. The potential emergence of a BRICS currency poses a direct challenge to the petrodollar system. Since the 1970s, the US dollar has reigned supreme in global oil markets. This has allowed the US to print dollars and finance its deficits. However, BRICS nations are challenging this system. China has started signing oil contracts in yuan. Russia seeks to bypass the US dollar in energy transactions. These moves represent a significant crack in the petrodollar edifice. The consequences could be far-reaching. It could lead to higher inflation in the United States. The US might need to offer higher interest rates. It could erode the US dollar's status as the world's reserve currency. The petrodollar is now facing an existential threat. The prospect of a new reserve currency, particularly one backed by the BRICS nations, holds immense allure for many countries around the world. For decades, these countries have chafed under a US-centric financial system. A new reserve currency could offer greater financial autonomy and stability. It could provide more favorable trade terms and reduce currency fluctuation exposure. The appeal is strong in regions like Africa and Latin America. Many have experienced the negative consequences of US economic policies. A BRICS-backed currency represents a chance to forge a more equitable global economic order. The global financial system stands at a crossroads. The US dollar, long the undisputed king of the global reserve currency, faces an unprecedented challenge from the rising economic might of the BRICS nations and their growing aspirations for a more multipolar world order. The stakes are incredibly high, with the potential to reshape global trade, finance, and geopolitics for generations to come. The world holds its breath, watching as these two economic titans circle each other, each testing the other's resolve. Will the US dollar weather this storm and maintain its dominance? Or will it succumb to the pressures of a changing world, giving way to a new, more multipolar financial order? The answer to this question will depend on a multitude of factors, including the economic performance of the BRICS nations, the stability of the US dollar, and the willingness of other countries to embrace a new global reserve currency. The outcome remains uncertain, but one thing is clear: the world is on the edge of change and the old order is crumbling. The BRICS initiative, initially dismissed by some as an unlikely alliance, begins to gain serious traction on the world stage. No longer a fringe movement, BRICS expands its ranks, welcoming new members like Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. This expansion sends a clear message: the desire for a more multipolar world, one less reliant on the US dollar, is resonating far beyond the founding members of BRICS. This growing coalition of nations, representing a significant portion of the global population and a diverse range of economies, begins to flex its collective muscle. They advocate for reforms within existing international financial institutions, like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, demanding greater representation and a more equitable distribution of voting power. Their calls for change are echoed by a growing chorus of dissent from economists, academics, and policymakers, even within the United States and Europe. These voices, once marginalized, begin to question the sustainability of a US-centric financial system, highlighting its inherent instability and its susceptibility to manipulation by a single superpower. The ground is shifting beneath the feet of the established order. The old assumptions about the permanence of US economic dominance are being challenged as never before. The world is waking up to the possibility of a different kind of global financial system, one where power is more diffuse, and the voices of the global south are given their due weight. In a move that sends shockwaves through global energy markets, Saudi Arabia, the world's largest oil exporter and a longtime US ally, announces its intention to join BRICS. This seismic shift, unthinkable just a few years prior, signals a potential realignment of global power with far-reaching consequences for the US dollar and the petrodollar system. The Saudis, long the linchpin of the petrodollar system, have grown increasingly frustrated with US foreign policy in the Middle East, particularly its perceived tilt towards Iran. They see in BRICS an opportunity to diversify their alliances, reduce their dependence on the US security umbrella, and forge closer economic ties with rising powers like China and India. The implications for the US dollar are profound. If Saudi Arabia, the custodian of the world's largest oil reserves, were to start accepting other currencies such as the yuan, or a potential BRICS currency, for oil transactions, it could deal a fatal blow to the petrodollar system. Such a move would undermine a key pillar of US economic dominance, jeopardizing its ability to finance its massive deficits and maintain its global influence. The potential demise of the petrodollar sends tremors through global financial markets. Investors, sensing a seismic shift in the global balance of power, begin to diversify their holdings, moving away from dollar-denominated assets and seeking refuge in alternative currencies, commodities, and emerging markets. The world watches with bated breath as the established order teeters on the brink. As the BRICS alliance solidifies, a new global financial order begins to take shape, promising greater equity and autonomy for developing countries. A multipolar reserve currency system could emerge, reducing reliance on the US dollar. However, this transition carries risks of fragmentation and instability. Coordination and trust building among BRICS nations are essential. The emergence of a multipolar world, with its shifting alliances and competing centers of power, presents both opportunities and challenges for nations large and small. The old certainties of the Cold War era have vanished, replaced by a more fluid and unpredictable geopolitical landscape. Countries are forced to navigate this uncertain terrain with caution, carefully calibrating their foreign policies and economic strategies. Alliances are shifting, with traditional partnerships being tested and new ones being forged. The United States, accustomed to calling the shots, finds itself increasingly challenged by the rise of new powers and the resurgence of old ones. The European Union, grappling with its own internal divisions and facing pressure from both the United States and Russia, seeks to chart a course that preserves its economic interests and strategic autonomy. Countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America are courted by both sides, presented with a bewildering array of opportunities and challenges. This new world order is one defined by complexity, fluidity, and the constant jostling for advantage. The old rules of the game no longer apply, and the outcome of this great power competition remains uncertain. One thing is clear: the world is entering a period of profound transformation, one that will reshape the global balance of power for decades to come. The battle for global financial dominance is evolving with the rise of cryptocurrencies. Decentralized and secure, they offer borderless transactions. BRICS nations see them as tools for financial sovereignty. Operating independently of central banks, they appeal to those seeking to evade financial sanctions. Yet their volatility and regulatory uncertainty pose challenges. As the rivalry between the BRICS nations and the West intensifies, a new financial architecture begins to emerge, one characterized by parallel systems and a growing fragmentation of global finance. This decoupling of financial systems, reminiscent of the economic divisions of the Cold War era, has profound implications for global trade, investment, and economic stability. The BRICS nations are actively developing their own financial infrastructure, including payment systems, clearinghouses, and credit rating agencies, designed to rival the Western-dominated institutions. These parallel systems, while still in their nascent stages, aim to reduce their reliance on the US dollar and Western financial institutions, providing alternative avenues for trade and investment within and among the BRICS nations. This fragmentation of global finance is further exacerbated by the increasing use of sanctions and other forms of economic coercion as tools of foreign policy. As the United States and its allies impose sanctions on countries deemed adversaries, those targeted nations are incentivized to seek alternative financial channels and partners, accelerating the trend towards decoupling. The emergence of these parallel systems raises concerns about a potential financial iron curtain descending upon the global economy, dividing the world into competing economic blocs. Such a scenario could lead to reduced trade, higher transaction costs, and increased economic instability, particularly for countries caught in the middle of these competing spheres of influence. The quest for greater financial autonomy and resilience extends beyond the realm of currencies and institutions. The BRICS nations, along with other countries seeking to reduce their dependence on the West, are actively pursuing policies of de-dollarization, nearshoring, and regionalization, fundamentally reshaping the global economic landscape. De-dollarization, the process of reducing reliance on the US dollar for trade and investment, is gaining momentum. Countries are increasingly conducting bilateral trade in local currencies, bypassing the need for US dollar settlements. This trend is particularly evident in trade between China and its major trading partners, such as Russia, Brazil, and several African nations. Nearshoring, the practice of relocating production and sourcing closer to home, is another key element of this decoupling. The COVID-19 pandemic, with its disruptions to global supply chains, exposed the vulnerabilities of an overly globalized and interconnected world. In response, countries are seeking to build more resilient and localized supply chains, reducing their dependence on distant suppliers, particularly in sectors deemed strategically important. This shift towards regionalization is further fueled by geopolitical considerations. As tensions between the United States and China escalate, countries are under pressure to choose sides, aligning themselves with one bloc or the other. This realignment of global power dynamics is leading to the formation of new regional trading blocs and economic partnerships, further fragmenting the global economy. Section 4. A World Adrift, Navigating the Crosscurrents of a New Cold War. The world stands at a precarious juncture, buffeted by the crosscurrents of a new Cold War. The rivalry between the United States and its allies and the BRICS nations, particularly China and Russia, is intensifying, casting a long shadow over the global economy and international relations. This new Cold War, unlike its predecessor, is not defined by rigid ideological blocs or a bipolar world order. It is a more fluid and complex competition, playing out on multiple fronts: economic, technological, geopolitical, with shifting alliances and no clear victors. This rivalry is reshaping the global landscape, creating new fault lines and exacerbating existing ones. Countries are caught in a tug-of-war, pressured to choose sides or risk being caught in the crossfire. The rules-based international order, already under strain, is being tested as never before. The stakes are incredibly high. The outcome of this rivalry will determine the shape of the 21st century and beyond, impacting global peace, prosperity, and the future of humanity itself. The world watches with a mix of anxiety and hope, wondering whether this new Cold War will lead to confrontation or whether a new equilibrium can be found. The dollar's uncertain future twilight of an empire or a new dawn. The US dollar, long the bedrock of the global financial system, finds itself at a critical crossroads. The rise of BRICS nations and alternative reserve currencies challenge the dollar's dominance. Some predict a twilight of the dollar's empire, envisioning a future where it is relegated to a mere regional currency. Others argue its deep liquidity and entrenched role in global trade will ensure its continued relevance. The reality is likely to be more nuanced, hinging on a complex interplay of factors. The United States must address its economic weaknesses to preserve the dollar's preeminence. Failure to do so could hasten the dollar's decline and usher in an era of greater uncertainty. A world in flux, navigating the shifting sands of the global order. The battle for global financial dominance is a symptom of a broader transformation, the shift from a unipolar to a multipolar world. The old certainties of US hegemony are giving way to a more fluid, complex geopolitical landscape. This multipolar world sees the rise of new power centers and the resurgence of old ones. Power is diffusing away from traditional state actors to non-state actors and individuals. This creates both opportunities and challenges. Navigating this terrain requires wisdom, pragmatism, and a commitment to dialogue. The challenges of the 21st century require global solutions and shared responsibility. The power of cooperation towards a more equitable and sustainable global financial system. We need a global financial system that benefits all countries, not just a select few. Cooperation, inclusivity, and transparency are key. Reforming institutions, promoting financial inclusion, and sustainable finance are essential. A call to action shaping the future of global finance. The future of global finance is not preordained, it will be shaped by the choices we make today. The current moment, while fraught with challenges, also presents a unique opportunity to rethink and reshape the global financial system, making it more just, equitable, and responsive to the needs of all people. This is not a task for governments and policymakers alone. It requires the active engagement of all stakeholders, including businesses, investors, civil society organizations, and individuals. We all have a role to play in shaping a more sustainable and equitable global financial system. Here are some ways individuals can make a difference. Educate yourself. Learn about the global financial system, its challenges, and the potential solutions. Support sustainable businesses. Choose to support businesses that are committed to environmental, social, and governance (ESG) principles. Advocate for change. Contact your elected officials and urge them to support policies that promote a more just and sustainable global financial system. Make informed investment choices. Consider the social and environmental impact of your investments, and explore opportunities to invest in sustainable businesses and initiatives. The challenges facing the global financial system are complex and interconnected, but they are not insurmountable. By working together, we can create a more just, equitable, and sustainable global financial system that benefits all people, not just a privileged few. The time for action is now.